I came home for Thanksgiving to find our house in Millbrook completely empty, except for my husband's stepfather sitting motionless in his leather recliner. A crumpled note on the kitchen counter read, "Gone to Costa Rica with Vanessa. You'll stay home and watch Theodore. He needs constant care now. Back next week, David." Theodore slowly opened his piercing gray eyes, looked directly at me, and whispered, "Shall we begin, dear?" I nodded without understanding why. 5 days later, David was on his knees, begging me not to destroy everything he'd worked for. Before we dive back in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if this story hit home, hit that subscribe button. I've got something really special lined up for tomorrow. But let me start from the beginning, because the shock of that moment nearly knocked me to my knees. I had driven 3 hours from my art studio in Riverside, my car packed with homemade cranberry sauce, sweet potato casserole, and all the ingredients for my grandmother's famous pumpkin pie recipe. David and I had been planning this Thanksgiving for weeks. His mother, Elena, was supposed to fly in from Phoenix, his sister, Natalie, was bringing her kids, and Theodore, David's stepfather, who'd been battling early-stage dementia, was going to join us for what we thought might be his last lucid holiday. The silence hit me first. No warm kitchen smells, no football commentary echoing from the living room, no sounds of family preparation. Just absolute, eerie quiet in our 2-story colonial that should have been bustling with activity. I called out as I juggled grocery bags through the front door. "David? Elena? Anyone home?" Nothing. The living room looked exactly as we'd left it 2 days ago when I'd driven back to Riverside to close my studio for the long weekend. David had promised to handle all the prep work, defrosting the turkey, setting up the guest rooms, making sure Theodore was comfortable and had his medications organized. Instead, I found Theodore alone in his recliner, wearing the same blue cardigan he'd had on when I left. He appeared to be sleeping, but something about his stillness felt deliberate, almost theatrical. That's when I saw the note. My hands trembled as I read David's hasty scrawl. Vanessa. The name hit me like ice water. Vanessa Rodriguez, his business partner from the consulting firm. The woman he'd been taking mysterious phone calls from for the past 2 months. The reason for his sudden weekend work trips to Denver? I read the note 3 times, certain there had to be some mistake. Costa Rica? When had that been planned? And why was I just finding out through a scribbled message left like instructions for a pet sitter? "He's not coming back today, is he?" Theodore's voice made me jump. I spun around to find him watching me with eyes that seemed far too alert for someone supposedly struggling with cognitive decline. I don't understand," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where is everyone? Elena was supposed to be here by now." He gestured toward the coffee table, where I noticed an iPad for the first time. "Check Elena's social media, sweetheart. She's been quite active documenting their little adventure." With shaking fingers, I opened the device. Elena's Facebook feed told the devastating story. Photos from the airport yesterday morning, David and Vanessa laughing over coffee, Elena beaming beside them with a caption about spontaneous adventures and finally taking that dream vacation. More photos followed. First-class seats, tropical drinks, a stunning resort overlooking the Pacific. The timestamp showed this trip had been planned at least a week, maybe longer. And there was Vanessa in every photo, not as a business colleague, but clearly as David's romantic partner. In one image, she wore what looked suspiciously like an engagement ring. "How long have you known?" I asked Theodore, sinking into the armchair across from him. "About Vanessa? Months. About this trip? Since Tuesday." His voice carried a sharpness that contradicted the confused old man act I'd grown accustomed to. "David thinks I was too out of it to notice him booking flights on my computer using my credit card details for the resort charges." The room seemed to tilt. "Your credit card?" Oh yes, my dear, that's just the beginning of what you don't know. I stared at this man I'd known for 3 years but had never really seen clearly. David always spoke of Theodore dismissively, the aging stepfather who needed constant supervision, whose memory was going fast, who was becoming more of a burden every day. But the man sitting across from me now seemed sharp, calculating, and completely aware of everything happening around him. Theodore, I need to understand what's going on. What's going on, he said, pushing himself up from the recliner with surprising steadiness, walked to the window and peered out at our quiet suburban street. David thinks he's left you here to babysit the senile old man while he starts his new life with his girlfriend. But what he doesn't realize is that he's actually given us the perfect opportunity to document everything he's been hiding. Hiding?
Theodore turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something fierce and determined in his expression. Financial fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and now abandonment. David's been quite busy, and I've been quite observant. He moved toward a bookshelf and pulled out what appeared to be a photo album. But when he opened it, I saw it was filled with printed documents, bank statements, and handwritten notes. I may have dementia, Olivia, but I'm not stupid, and my mind is clearer than anyone in this family believes. He handed me the album. David's been systematically draining my accounts for 8 months, forging my signature on documents and making financial decisions in my name. The Costa Rica trip? Paid for entirely with my money. I flipped through pages of evidence, unauthorized transfers, forged signatures, medical bills that had been paid but services never received. The documentation was meticulous, organized, and damning. "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked. Because I wanted to see how far he'd go, how much he'd steal, whether he'd actually abandon me when things got inconvenient. Theodore's eyes hardened. Turns out, quite far, quite a lot, and absolutely yes. I felt something shift inside me, a cold anger replacing the shock and hurt. "What do you need me to do?" Theodore's smile transformed his entire face. "Help me make sure David faces the consequences of every single choice he's made, starting with the fact that he just committed several felonies, abandoned his legal responsibilities, and left evidence of everything right here in this house." He extended his hand to me. "Shall we begin, Olivia?" This time when I nodded, I understood exactly what I was agreeing to. This one took us ages to get right. So, if you're loving it, hitting subscribe would honestly mean the world to us. Okay, back to business. Over the next hour, Theodore revealed the full scope of David's deception, and I realized I'd been living with a stranger. "Your husband has been quite methodical," Theodore said, spreading more documents across the dining room table. "Look at this timeline." The papers showed a clear pattern starting 8 months ago, right after Theodore's dementia diagnosis. He'd immediately obtained power of attorney, claiming Theodore needed help managing his affairs. What followed was a systematic looting of Theodore's accounts. He started small, Theodore explained, pointing to early transactions, a few hundred here and there for medical expenses that never materialized. Then it escalated, my Medicare payments being redirected to his personal account, my Social Security checks deposited into a joint account I never authorized. I stared at a bank statement showing a $15,000 withdrawal labeled Home Care Services. "But you've been living here with us. What home care services?" "Exactly." Theodore's eyes glinted. "David has been billing my insurance for 24-hour nursing care I never received, physical therapy sessions that never happened, medical equipment that was never delivered. He's been collecting thousands while providing minimal actual care." My stomach churned as I flipped through more evidence. David had been charging Theodore's accounts for everything, groceries, utilities, even David's car payments, all disguised as care-related expenses. "But how did you gather all this if you have dementia?" Theodore chuckled dryly. "That's the beautiful irony, my dear. My diagnosis is mild cognitive impairment, not severe dementia. I have good days and bad days, but David assumes every day is a bad day. He's been having conversations right in front of me, making phone calls in my presence, handling my documents like I'm completely unaware. He pulled out a small digital recorder. I've been documenting everything for months. David discussing his plans with Vanessa, Elena helping him justify the financial transfers, conversations about how much longer they'll have to deal with the old man. The betrayal cut deeper as I realized my own role in their plans. They never intended for me to be family, did they? I'm just free elder care. Worse than that, Theodore said gently. Check your joint banking account. I pulled up our account on my phone and my blood ran cold. Our savings, $23,000 we'd been accumulating for a down payment on a bigger house, was nearly empty. The last withdrawal was 3 days ago. $18,500 labeled simply travel expenses. He used our house fund for this trip, I whispered. And look at this, Theodore handed me another document. David has been telling me for months that you're struggling financially with your art studio, that you might need to close it soon. He convinced me to sign papers authorizing him to help with your business expenses. The papers showed my signature, except I'd never signed them. David had forged my name to access Theodore's accounts under the pretense of helping my failing business. My studio isn't failing, I said, anger building. I had my best year ever. David's been lying to you about me while lying to me about everything else. Theodore nodded knowingly. Classic manipulation. Keep everyone isolated, control the information flow, and make yourself the indispensable middleman. Your husband learned from the best. His mother perfected these techniques during her first marriage. He showed me a faded legal document. Elena did exactly this to Theodore's brother 15 years ago. Isolated him from family, gained financial control, then disappeared with his assets after he died. David's following the same playbook.
The pieces clicked into place. David's gradual encouragement for me to work from home instead of maintaining my studio downtown. His suggestions that I didn't need to attend family gatherings because Theodore gets confused around new people. The way he'd positioned himself as the sole interpreter of Theodore's needs and wishes. We've both been played, I realized. Indeed. But they've made a crucial error. Theodore's voice took on a strategic tone. They've underestimated us, and they've left us together with access to everything. I looked around our house, David's house, technically, but filled with Theodore's belongings and paid for with Theodore's manipulated finances. What exactly are you proposing? Theodore pulled out a manila folder I hadn't noticed before. I've been working with a lawyer, quietly, without David's knowledge. My real will, my actual financial situation, and my plans for justice. He opened the folder to reveal documents that made my eyes widen. Theodore wasn't just financially comfortable, he was wealthy. Investment accounts, property holdings, and assets totaling over $2.8 million, all hidden from David and Elena. David thinks he's stealing from a confused old man with modest savings. He has no idea about my real wealth, which I've been carefully protecting. The accounts he's been draining? Those were test accounts I set up specifically to see how far he'd go. You've been running a sting operation on your own family? For months. My lawyer has been documenting every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every instance of elder abuse. We have enough evidence to send David to prison for years. Theodore leaned forward intensely. But I need your help to complete the plan. David thinks he's left you here as unpaid elder care while he starts his new life. Instead, you're going to help me document his abandonment, gather the final pieces of evidence, and ensure he faces consequences for everything he's done. I thought about my drained savings, my manipulated business reputation, the years I'd spent believing David's version of events about his difficult stepfather. The anger crystallized into determination. What do you need me to do? First,
we document the abandonment. Photos, timestamps, evidence that he left me without proper care or medication. Second, we trace the money. Every dollar he's stolen can be tracked and proven. Third, we prepare for his return. Theodore's smile was sharp as a blade. When David comes back from Costa Rica expecting to find a grateful wife and a dying stepfather, he's going to find two people who know exactly who he really is and have the evidence to prove it. He extended his hand across the table. Partners in justice, Olivia? I shook his hand firmly. Partners in justice, Theodore. Let's make sure David gets exactly what he deserves. For the first time in years, I felt like I had an ally who truly understood what we were up against. Theodore wasn't the confused burden David had portrayed. He was sharp, strategic, and ready for war. And so was I. The next morning, Theodore and I began executing our plan with military precision. He was nothing like the confused old man David had described. His mind was razor sharp, his memory for details impeccable, and his strategic thinking ruthless. First rule of warfare, Theodore said as we sat in his study surrounded by boxes of documents, know your enemy better than they know themselves. David thinks he's clever, but he's also predictable. He handed me a timeline he had created showing David's behavioral patterns over the past year. Every major theft coincided with a business trip with Vanessa. Every forged document was signed when he thought I was having a bad day. Every lie to you aligned with the lie he told me about you. The pattern was chilling in its consistency. David had been living a double life so systematically that he had created schedules for his deception. Your job today is to become the worried, overwhelmed caregiver. We need documentation of abandonment that will stand up in court. I spent the morning photographing everything. Theodore's medications scattered and disorganized, the empty refrigerator David was supposed to have stocked, the heating bill that hadn't been paid despite Theodore's account showing charges for utilities. Each photo was time-stamped and geotagged, creating an irrefutable record of neglect. Theodore, meanwhile, was on the phone with his lawyer, Benjamin Hartwell, a man David had never met and didn't know existed. Benjamin has been my attorney for 20 years. David only knows about my public lawyer, the one who handles routine matters. Benjamin manages my real assets and has been building our case since this started. The depth of Theodore's preparation astounded me. He'd been playing chess while David thought they were playing checkers. Around noon, we received an unexpected gift from Elena in Costa Rica. I quickly disheveled my appearance and positioned Theodore to look more frail than he actually was. "Elena, darling!" Elena's voice was bright with vacation happiness, tropical drinks and beach umbrellas visible behind her. "How's Dad doing?" I let exhaustion creep into my voice. "It's been challenging, Elena. He had a difficult night, couldn't remember where he was, kept asking for David. I'm managing his medications as best I can, but I'm not a trained caregiver." Elena's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, well, you're doing great, I'm sure. Is he eating?"
When he remembers to. I found him trying to take his evening pills at breakfast time. Without David here to manage his routine, I let the sentence hang. Theodore played his part perfectly, looking confused and asking in a loud voice, "Is that my daughter? Why isn't she here for Thanksgiving?" Elena winced. "We'll be back soon, Dad. Just enjoying some sunshine while we can." After ending the call, Theodore grinned. "Did you record that?" "Every second." I showed him the saved video. She just admitted on camera that they left a confused dementia patient in the care of someone unqualified while they're on vacation. Beautiful. Now for Phase 2. Phase 2 involved Theodore's neighbor network, people David had dismissed as nosy old busybodies, but who Theodore had carefully cultivated as allies. Within hours, 3 different neighbors had stopped by to check on Theodore, each expressing concern about his family's absence during the holiday.
Mrs. Pemberton from next door was particularly valuable. I saw David loading suitcases into that woman's car Tuesday morning, she told me, loud enough for Theodore to hear. Didn't even tell us he was leaving town. What if Theodore had an emergency? Each neighbor visit was documented, their statements recorded, their contact information saved for future reference. By evening, we had a community of witnesses ready to testify about David's abandonment and neglect. The third phase of our preparation involved Theodore's financial institutions. Unbeknownst to David, Theodore maintained accounts at 3 different banks under his legal name and a family trust David knew nothing about. Tomorrow, we're transferring my real assets out of David's reach permanently, Theodore explained as we reviewed account statements. Every dollar he thinks he'll inherit is about to disappear into legal structures he can't touch. But it was the fourth phase that truly showcased Theodore's strategic brilliance. He'd been secretly recording conversations for months, not just David's financial scheming, but his personal calls with Vanessa. "Listen to this," Theodore said, playing a recording from 2 weeks ago. David's voice was clear through the speaker. "The old man's getting worse. Another year of this and I'll lose my mind. At least once he's gone, we won't have to pretend anymore. Costa Rica will be perfect timing. If something happens while we're gone, it's not our fault." Vanessa's response was equally damning. "And if he lingers too long, the nursing home conversation? Already researched the cheapest one I could find. Medicaid will cover it once I've spent down his assets properly." I felt sick listening to them discuss Theodore's life like a business transaction, but Theodore remained coldly analytical. "They're planning to warehouse me in a substandard facility after stealing everything I've worked for," he said calmly. "This recording alone proves elder abuse conspiracy." As Friday afternoon arrived, we moved into the final preparation phase. Theodore's lawyer, Benjamin, arrived with a team of financial advisors and legal assistants. In Theodore's study, they executed a series of legal maneuvers that effectively locked David out of any inheritance. "The beauty of this is that everything is completely legal," Benjamin explained. "Theodore is mentally competent. These are his assets to distribute as he chooses, and David's actions constitute grounds for disinheritance under state law." New trusts were established, beneficiary designations changed, and property titles transferred. Most importantly, a comprehensive will was drafted that specifically detailed David's financial crimes as justification for his complete disinheritance. But Benjamin saved the best for last. "Based on the evidence you've gathered, we're prepared to file criminal charges for elder abuse, identity theft, and financial fraud. The prosecutor has already reviewed the preliminary evidence and is very interested." Theodore looked at me with satisfaction. By the time David returns from Costa Rica, he'll discover that not only has he lost his inheritance, but he's also facing federal charges. That evening, as we sat in the living room reviewing our completed preparations, I marveled at the transformation. 3 days ago, I thought I was married to a successful consultant with a burdensome stepfather. Now I understood I'd been living with a criminal who'd been systematically abusing a shark, wealthy man who'd been planning his downfall for months. "There's one more thing," Theodore said, handing me a sealed envelope. "This is for you to open after everything's finished. A small token of appreciation for someone who showed me genuine kindness when my own family showed only greed." I tried to refuse, but Theodore insisted. "David thinks he's going to return to business as usual. Instead, he's going to face the consequences of every choice he's made. And you, my dear, are going to be free to build the life you actually deserve." As I went to bed that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete clarity about who I was and what I was worth. Theodore had given me more than alliance in our fight for justice. He'd given me back my self-respect. Tomorrow, David would call to check in, expecting to find his plan proceeding smoothly. Instead, he was going to learn that his victims had become his adversaries, and his adversaries were winning. Saturday morning brought the call we'd been expecting. David's voice crackled through the phone speaker, background noise of airport crowds and flight announcements clearly audible.
I had practiced this conversation with Theodore coaching me,
My voice carried just the right note of exhaustion and barely controlled stress. David, I really need you to come home. Theodore's condition has deteriorated significantly since you left. A pause, then David's voice, slightly irritated. What do you mean deteriorated? He was fine when we left. He's been having episodes. Confusion, agitation. He fell yesterday trying to get to the bathroom alone. I found him on the floor at 3 a.m. I think he needs professional medical attention. Theodore, listening from his chair, gave me an approving nod. Every word I spoke was technically true. I had found him on the floor at 3 a.m., though he'd been doing yoga stretches, not falling. Can't you handle it for 2 more days? David's impatience was becoming more obvious. We're literally about to board our flight to Miami. Elena's finally relaxing for the first time in months. David, your stepfather is your responsibility, not mine. I'm not trained for this level of care. What if something serious happens? Background voices suggested Vanessa was urging him to end the call. David's tone shifted to dismissive. Look, just keep him comfortable. Give him extra medication if he's agitated. We'll deal with whatever needs dealing with when we get back. After hanging up, Theodore smiled grimly. Perfect. He just told you to medicate me without medical supervision while he prioritizes his vacation. Another felony for the collection. Sunday evening brought their return. Theodore and I positioned ourselves carefully, him in his recliner, appearing frail and confused, me exhausted and overwhelmed in the chair beside him. The evidence folders were hidden but easily accessible. The recording equipment was running. We heard car doors slam, then voices approaching the front door. David's laugh was loud and relaxed, clearly still in vacation mode. "Home sweet home," Elena called out as they entered, David and Vanessa carrying duty-free bags and sporting deep tans. David stopped short when he saw the scene. Theodore slumped in his chair, me looking haggard beside him, prescription bottles scattered on the side table. "What happened here?" David demanded, his vacation mood evaporating. "Your stepfather had a very difficult weekend. I've been documenting everything for the doctors." Elena rushed to Theodore's side. Dad, can you hear me?" Theodore's performance was masterful. Eyes unfocused, slight tremor in his hands, voice weak and confused. "Elena? Why did you leave me? I kept asking for you." "We were only gone for a few days, Dad," Elena said, guilt creeping into her voice. "Few days?" Theodore's confusion seemed genuine. "It felt like weeks. Olivia tried to help me, but I was so scared. Why didn't David take care of me?" David's face flushed. "I left Olivia detailed instructions. She was supposed to manage everything." "I did exactly what I could," I replied, standing up with the documentation folder. "But David, you left a dementia patient with someone who has no medical training while you went on vacation. Do you understand how serious that is?" Vanessa, uncomfortable with the family tension, tried to fade into the background, but Theodore's sharp eyes caught her. "Who's that woman? David, who is she? Where's your wife?" David's face went white. In his arrogance, he'd brought Vanessa directly into the house where Theodore could see her. That's Vanessa from work, Dad. She helped us get home safely." "Work?" Theodore's voice gained strength, his confusion axed slightly. "Is that what you're calling it now?" The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Elena looked between David and Vanessa, clearly recognizing something was wrong. "David, we need to talk about Theodore's care going forward and about some financial matters that came up while you were gone." "Financial matters?" I opened the folder and pulled out the first bank statement. Theodore's accounts show some unusual activity, large withdrawals that don't match any care expenses I can find. David's panic was immediate and visible. "Those are legitimate care costs. I handle all of Theodore's finances." "I know you do. That's what we need to discuss." Theodore chose that moment to deliver his knockout blow. His confusion act disappeared entirely as he sat up straight and looked directly at David. "Actually, David, I think it's time we discussed all of your financial activities, including the $18,500 you charged to my accounts for your Costa Rica vacation." The silence that followed was deafening. David's mouth opened and closed without sound. Elena stepped back as if slapped. Vanessa looked ready to bolt for the door. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Elena whispered. Theodore stood up with far more steadiness than he'd shown all weekend. "I'm talking about months of financial fraud, identity theft,
elder abuse, and the fact that your son has been systematically stealing from me while convincing me I'm too confused to notice. He walked to his desk and pulled out the recording device. Would you like to hear David and Vanessa discussing how long they'll have to wait for me to die? Or perhaps their conversation about putting me in the cheapest nursing home they can find once they've stolen everything I own? David found his voice. You're confused, Dad. You don't understand what you're saying.
I understand perfectly, Theodore replied, his voice sharp as steel. I understand that you forged my signature on dozens of documents. I understand that you've been billing my insurance for care you never provided. I understand that you used my credit cards to fund your romantic getaway while abandoning me without proper care. Elena sank into a chair, the full scope of the situation hitting her. David, please tell me this isn't true. Instead of answering his mother, David turned on me with fury. This is your doing, isn't it? You manipulated a sick old man. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway, you documented your crimes. Benjamin Hartwell stepped into the room, followed by 2 police officers and a woman I recognized as the district attorney from local news. David Chen, you're under arrest for elder abuse, identity theft, and financial fraud. As the handcuffs clicked around David's wrists, he looked at me with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've done. You'll get nothing. Nothing. Theodore's laugh was cold. Actually, David, you're the one getting nothing. Olivia, would you like to show him the new will? I pulled out Benjamin's legal documents. David, as of Friday afternoon, you've been completely disinherited. Theodore's estate will be going to charity and to people who actually showed him kindness. Elena began crying, the reality of her son's actions and their consequences finally sinking in. Vanessa tried to slip out during the commotion, but was stopped by the second officer. Vanessa Rodriguez, you're also under arrest as an accessory to financial fraud. As David was led away, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Olivia. Theodore's voice followed him to the door. Yes, David, it is. The house fell silent except for Elena's quiet sobbing and the sound of police cars driving away. Theodore and I looked at each other, years of planning and 3 days of execution finally complete. How do you feel? Theodore asked. I thought about it carefully. Free, I said finally. For the first time in years, completely free. 3 weeks later, I sat in Benjamin Hartwell's law office, still processing the magnitude of how completely our lives had changed. The legal proceedings had moved with surprising speed once the evidence was presented. David's crimes were so well documented that his expensive defense attorney had recommended a plea bargain. The prosecutor accepted David's plea this morning, Benjamin informed me, sliding a document across his mahogany desk. 18 months in federal prison for elder abuse and financial fraud, plus full restitution of stolen funds. Vanessa received 8 months and community service as an accessory. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. And Elena? No charges. The investigation concluded she was manipulated rather than complicit, though she'll have to live with the knowledge of what her son became. Benjamin's expression softened. She's actually been quite cooperative in helping recover some of the stolen assets. The past few weeks had revealed the full scope of David's deception. Beyond the obvious financial fraud, investigators had discovered he'd been running similar schemes on 2 elderly clients at his consulting firm. The ripple effects had destroyed his career, his reputation, and any chance of the future he'd planned with Vanessa. Now, let's discuss Theodore's final wishes, Benjamin continued, opening a thick folder. Theodore had passed away peacefully in his sleep just 10 days after David's arrest. The stress of the confrontation and legal proceedings had taken their toll, but he'd lived long enough to feel justice served. His last words to me were, "Thank you for letting an old man die with dignity intact." Benjamin said that Theodore was very specific about his gratitude towards you. Beyond the emotional support you provided, your willingness to help document David's crimes was instrumental in building our case. He handed me another set of documents that made me gasp.
Theodore had left me $400,000, enough to expand my art studio, buy a house, and secure my financial independence for years to come. But there's more, Benjamin continued. Theodore established an art scholarship in your name at Millbrook College. He wanted to support other creative people who might be trapped in situations like yours. The scholarship would fund emerging artists for decades, Theodore's final act of generosity extending far beyond his own life. Reading the description he'd written, I understood he'd seen my situation clearly from the beginning. A talented woman whose potential was being systematically diminished by someone who claimed to love her. Now, Theodore's last instructions, Benjamin said, handing me the sealed envelope I'd seen in Theodore's study. Inside was a handwritten letter in Theodore's precise script. Dear Olivia, if you're reading this, then justice has been served, and I can rest knowing David faced consequences for his actions. But more importantly, you've discovered your own strength. The money I've left you isn't charity. It's payment for services rendered. You provided companionship, dignity, and genuine care to someone the world had written off. In our few days together, you showed me more respect than my family had in years. Use this gift to build the life you actually want, not the one someone else planned for you. Your art matters. Your voice matters. You matter. You found the cast-off but brought the masterpiece to life. Now go create your own. With deepest gratitude and respect, Benjamin.
I've also left instructions for Benjamin to help you navigate the divorce proceedings. David's criminal conviction makes that process much simpler, and his debts are his alone. Finally, know that you gave an old man the greatest gift possible, the chance to fight back against those who'd tried to steal his dignity. We made quite a team, didn't we? Live well, my dear, you've earned it. With profound gratitude, Theodore. I sat quietly for several minutes, tears blurring my vision. Theodore had seen potential in me that I'd forgotten existed, and his final gift was the freedom to rediscover it. There's one more thing, Benjamin said gently. The house in Millbrook. Theodore left it to you as well, though I suspect you might not want to keep it. He was right. The house held too many painful memories of my marriage to David. But it also represented something else, proof that people could change their circumstances when they found the courage to act. I'd like to sell it, I decided, and use the proceeds to fund domestic violence resources. Theodore would appreciate the irony of David's former home helping other people escape manipulative relationships. Benjamin smiled. I think he would indeed. 6 months later, I stood in the gallery space of my expanded art studio in downtown Riverside, surrounded by paintings I'd created since leaving Millbrook. The work was different now, bolder, more honest, infused with a strength I hadn't possessed before meeting Theodore. The opening night of my solo exhibition, Reclaimed Voices, had drawn a larger crowd than I'd ever imagined. Local collectors, art students, and community members filled the space, discussing pieces that explored themes of manipulation, resistance, and rebirth. Mrs. Pemberton had driven down from Millbrook for the opening, bringing several other neighbors who'd witnessed David's neglect of Theodore. They'd become unlikely champions of my work, spreading word about the exhibition throughout their community. Theodore would be so proud, Mrs. Pemberton said, studying a painting I'd titled Alliance, 2 figures, one young and one elderly, standing together against a stormy background. I'd also painted Theodore's portrait from memory, capturing the sharp intelligence in his eyes that David had never bothered to see. The placard beside it read, "In memory of Theodore Hartwell, who taught me that dignity is worth fighting for." Elena had come to the opening too, our relationship cautiously rebuilding after everything that had happened. She'd been devastated by David's crimes, but had begun attending therapy to understand how she'd enabled his behavior. Her presence tonight felt like a small step toward healing for both of us. "I keep thinking about what Theodore said," she told me as we stood before his portrait, "about David underestimating both of you.
I think I underestimated you too, Olivia. I'm sorry for that. Her apology meant more than she probably realized. For years, I'd felt invisible in David's family, my opinions dismissed and my contributions minimized. Elena's acknowledgement of my worth was another piece of validation I'd been missing. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing alone in front of the final painting in the series, a self-portrait I'd titled Emergence. It showed a woman stepping out of shadows into bright light, her face determined and hopeful. Benjamin approached, carrying a glass of wine and wearing an expression of satisfaction. He said, "Theodore left one final surprise, handing me an envelope. Instructions were to give this to you at your first art exhibition." Inside was a newspaper clipping from 40 years ago, a review of Theodore's late wife Martha's art exhibition. She'd been a painter too, something David had never mentioned. The review praised her unflinching honesty and courage in depicting difficult truths. A handwritten note from Theodore was attached. "Martha would have loved your work. Artists who tell the truth are rare and precious. Keep telling yours." Standing in my gallery, surrounded by work that honestly depicted my journey from victim to survivor, I felt Theodore's presence as clearly as if he were standing beside me. He'd given me more than money or legal victory. He'd given me permission to reclaim my own narrative. 3 years later, the Theodore Hartwell Art Scholarship had funded 12 emerging artists. The domestic violence center I'd established in Millbrook had helped dozens of families escape dangerous situations, and my art continued to evolve and find new audiences. David had been released from prison 6 months ago, but his attempts to contact me had been blocked by legal restrictions. His consulting career was over, his reputation destroyed, and, according to Elena, he was working at a retail job while living in a studio apartment. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, but I felt profound gratitude for the path it had opened for me. Sometimes I drove past the old house in Millbrook, now converted into transitional housing for abuse survivors. The Theodore Hartwell Foundation plaque by the front door bore a simple inscription, "Dignity Restored." In the rocking chair where I'd first found Theodore, women now sat planning their new lives, supported by resources that would help them build independent futures. It seemed like the perfect tribute to a man who spent his final days fighting for justice and dignity. That Thanksgiving had changed everything, not because of what I'd lost, but because of what I'd gained. Theodore had shown me strength could emerge from the most unexpected alliances, and that sometimes being abandoned by the wrong people leads you directly to your real purpose. I'd come home that day expecting family dinner and found betrayal instead. But I'd also found a mentor, a mission, and most importantly, myself.